Hello and welcome to Gardening Australia. Spring is in the air and the soil, the sun, the smiles, and on the show. What better place to kick things off than in Nambour, here at the Queensland Garden Expo. While I do a hot lap here, get ready for everything you need to spring into action in the garden. Here's what's coming up.
Who doesn't want to make gardening easier? That's why I've got so many wicking beds. But you can't entirely neglect them. So I'm going to show you how to keep them in optimal growing condition.
Is your grapevine giving you grief? Well, I've got a grafting technique to share. One where you can keep your old rootstock and increase your fruit production.
Hey, Oliver. Hi. I'm visiting one of Victoria's most renowned market gardens to learn some secrets and see all of that skill it takes to produce some spectacular vegetables.
And there's a lot more to a garden than plants. I'm taking a look at what happens when native bees and other beneficial insects become a gardener's priority.
Okay, here we go. After three. 1, 2, 3.
The Queensland Garden Expo has been a must-grow event on the Sunshine Coast for 40 years. Head gardener Marion Beasley says it's better than ever and still growing. Marion, how did the expo begin?
40 years ago, it was actually a state of origin night, and a few of our local nursery people got together and said, how can we share our knowledge with the general public? And they came up with this plan to stage an event. And from there on, it's grown.
So what's on offer?
Oh, too much to do in one day, Costa. We've got a poultry display, we've got heaps of kids' activities, we've got a huge range of nursery products and plants and lots of talks and garden club displays and floral art displays and on it goes. And gardening's something that people of all ages and abilities can do, and we welcome them and we cater to it.
There's no doubt Australia's filled with amazing plant growers, and Tammy's off to visit one of the best when it comes to fabulous foliage.
I'm in a beautiful bushy suburb northwest of Sydney. And the plants I've come to see are over there in a series of purpose-built, temperature-controlled greenhouses.
You'll have to fight your way through a little bit. There's an orchid there. Oh, this is a lovely plant. This is Philodendron squamiferum, variegated. It's got a lovely hairy petiole. Very, very popular.
Yes.
It's rare.
This astonishing collection is like a who's who of the popular tropical plant world.
They grow indoors. People can grow them indoors. They don't need a setup like this. They are very, very good for indoor cultivation. You put in a humidifier and lighting, and people get really involved.
Darwin Stewart's collection is clearly the work of someone who has dedicated many years to learning and perfecting the needs of some of the most finicky plants. And over the years, through trial and error, her skills have grown, and so has her collection.
I like to grow lots of different species, but I love orchids. I started off more in orchids and then gradually grew into the aroids, but then I went into tacas and I went to sarracenias and nepenthes. If it grows for me, I'm happy. And I seem to be lucky that most of the things I tackle I can grow, and if I don't, I teach myself how to do it.
That's the way it is, right? We're determined to grow things. Gowan's day job is in the fashion industry, and it turns out there's some crossover between fashionable clothes and fashionable foliage. Why do you think there's so much demand for these leaves?
Because they're beautiful.
Agreed. She's built a side hustle of growing impeccably lush leaves for high-end Sydney florists and floral artists.
People get married, they want lovely floral displays, and apart from flowers, they also want lots of gorgeous leaves, and they last very well. And they have such a wonderful variety of shapes and textures, and they're spectacular.
And when you say they last long, how long are we talking?
I have had one leaf in a vial for 6 months. That was a freak, but they are the sort of leaf that you can cut and then use for an event, pull it out and use for another event, use for another event. So you can have them as a cut foliage for 2 months, 3 months.
Wow, so much better than cut flowers.
Absolutely. And a lot of people like just green there. A lot of people don't want necessarily a floral arrangement, but they'll be happy with the green arrangement. We have here the Thai constellation. You can see that this plant is gradually maturing as we now have the fenestrations within the leaf. Because when they're little, they don't have these gaps that you see here. It is a climber. The roots are extremely fleshy and very, very strong and will wander around. If it were growing wild, it would be wandering in the undergrowth. It is a stable variegated leaf. And you can see from this where it got its name because of the specks of cream, hence the name Thai constellation, because it looks like a starburst. One of my favourite plants is this Bulbophyllum phalaenopsis. They come from New Guinea. I bought it from a small seed for 4 years ago. I label everything with the dates. And you can see how the progression has gone from very tiny bulbs until we reach what it is today, which is quite large. And then we come down a bit further. Here we have Anthurium balaeoanum. Beautiful thing. It will get bigger than that.
Wow, these caladiums.
They're beautiful, aren't they? Fabulous colour.
Look at the size of this Dioscorea. Mine have never grown like that.
The colour on the back is just gorgeous.
Is that why they're known as a stained glass
window plant? That's correct.
Gowan, it's probably really hard to choose a favourite. I mean, you've got a lot to choose from, but if you had to, what would be yours?
This changes. I do and always have had a real love for Warocqueanums. They're nicknamed the Queen. I just call them Warocks, but they refer to them as the Queen of the aroid world, and then the Veitchii is the King. They're beautiful.
Oh, they are. Such gorgeous leaves and just the shine on them.
They're wonderful as a cut foliage. Sort of, I cry every time I cut a really big one, but oh well.
A lot of people watching this will have some serious leaf envy. So I asked Gowan to share her fertiliser tips. In addition to typical controlled release fertiliser for indoor plants, she also has a weekly method, as in week strength every week. Gowan uses a diluted mixture through an inline irrigation system. But at home, you can mix it into a 10 or 20 litre bucket. Gowan, I understand you've got a day job, and so I guess this is considered the night job. How do you fit it all in?
Well, I don't have too much of a love affair with my pillow, for a start. Yes, I try and get up, I do my day job, and then I come home, and if I have an order to do or something's come in through the day, it can be, I'll be in the greenhouse till midnight sometimes.
I guess it's lucky you don't like sleep.
I love sleep, but it doesn't love me.
Later in the show, Gowan is demonstrating what to do if your rainforest climber is about to hit the roof.
Why do plant experts always use scientific names? Well, plant experts use scientific names because common names get confusing. A common name can apply to 2 or 3 different plants, and a good example is native fuchsia. Now, this can apply to Coria reflexa or epicris, depending on whether you live in Victoria or New South Wales. Now, the 2 plants aren't even related. Now, to confuse the issue, Eremophila maculata from the arid regions is also called native fuchsia. So scientific names are meant to minimise confusion. Scientific language was chosen as Latin in theory to be a neutral middle ground, but over time has evolved to be an eclectic mix of people and place names, other languages and cultural references.
What's gone wrong with my fern? It's a common question, and nothing's gone wrong with your fern. If you find these dots on the back of the fronds or the leaves of your ferns, that's just natural. People often think it's like a pest or disease, but it's not. It's the natural way that all ferns reproduce. They're very primitive plants. They don't have flowers. They have these spore sacs that are filled with little spores that are like seeds. And with moisture and wind, they'll actually spread around, and eventually you'll see a little green patch, like a liverwort. And that's where the new fern will grow from. It's a prothallus. Fantastic plants, ferns. Enjoy them. Don't worry too much. Just enjoy nature.
Can I recommend a wattle for a small garden? Well, look no further than the Brisbane golden wattle. It's quick growing, it only reaches 3 to 4 metres high. When it flowers in spring, it is spectacular and very fragrant. You can eat the young pods and you can roast the seed. It'll grow in pretty much any soil type right the way down the east coast of Australia, and it'll even tolerate frost.
Spring is a great time to capture that energy in the air and do jobs that will pay dividends come harvest time. Sophie's got some tips that'll help keep your wicking beds pumping.
For many gardeners, wicking beds have been a bit of a revolution. They save water, provide consistent conditions, and allow you to grow a garden on almost any surface. Any wonder I have over 20 of them. To be honest, if I'd known how good they were when I started this garden, I'd have more. They just make gardening so much easier. But while wicking beds can reduce your workload, no garden is completely set and forget, and you'll get the best out of them with a little bit of love. So I'm going to show you how to maintain, reset and replant your bed. If you're not familiar with a wicking bed, it's simply a garden bed or container with a water reservoir at the base and the growing bed above it. It's often separated by a geotextile fabric, which is a permeable synthetic material that helps to stop the fines of the soil silting up the reservoir layer. You can make wicking beds from scratch or retrofit existing raised garden beds which are made from either wood or metal. I've used IBCs, which are intermediate bulk containers that I've cut in half. Then I've clad them with timber. This not only acts as insulation, keeping the soil cooler, but it also stops the light getting to the reservoir layer and turning the water green. Whatever they're made of, they'll all want the same attention. One of the key things to understand about maintaining a wicking bed is water. While the reservoir needs to hold water, I like to have the ability to be able to drain it completely. That means in winter, when I'm getting plenty of rain, I can let the water run through like a regular raised bed. So what I've done is position the overflow point right at the base of the reservoir with an elbow up to the level where the soil and the reservoir meet. When I want the water reservoir to hold water, I have the elbow in the upright position. And in winter, over the rainy months, I turn it to face downwards to allow the bed to drain. It also comes in handy if you've accidentally drained an organic fertiliser bottle in your bed, and then you can simply open up the reservoir and let the whole thing flush through. While you might be tempted to keep your reservoir layer constantly full, I find it's better to let the water level go up and down. I've found with these beds in summer, I need to top them up once a week, maybe twice a week in a heat wave, depending on the size of the plant. Just like a garden in the ground, the soil in your wicking bed is also essential, not only for plant health, but also for the function of the bed. For soil to act as a wick, it has to be high in organic matter. While you might have used a good quality mix when you set up your bed, over time, plants and soil microorganisms break it down. So every time you plant, you should also add organics. I use compost and an organic slow-release fertiliser to keep my plants healthy.
Now it's time for some new crops.
I've got some lettuces that are ready to be planted. I find I can fit 2 punnets of loose leaf lettuces in and use them as cut and come again crops. And just as you would for any other plants, you need to add mulch. This reduces evaporation of moisture from the soil, insulates the soil and adds extra organic matter as it breaks down. As the plant's roots establish, they'll be able to access water from below. But it's important to water them in at the start and keep a careful watch for the first few weeks. The wicking revolution is a boon for busy gardeners, growing huge harvests for even less effort. But like everything, they'll always thrive with a little attention, so wick away.
One of the best things about being a gardener is we get a front row seat to see so much of Australia's biodiversity. But we can also play a role and help protect the plants and animals we love by selecting the right species for our patch and keeping an eye out for pests and disease. The Sunshine Coast Biodiversity crew are out there busily educating an army of gardeners. Rita, what is it that makes the Sunshine Coast here so special?
Of course, there's so many things that make the Sunshine Coast great. Our beautiful rainforest or our beaches, but to me, it's our unique wildlife.
What are some of the threats that you're facing up here?
We've identified some priority species, so you don't have to go far to see the sand dunes with the basket asparagus fern or the cat's claws threatening our hinterland environment.
As gardeners, we want to help contribute to the solutions. What can we do day to day?
Find out what's going on in your own backyard, manage pests best you can, take care of your soils, plant native plants for the benefit of your birds and your insects, and go visit a native nursery and go pick up a plant and get amongst it.
Let's catch up with Josh now, who's found a gardener in WA who uncovered a whole new world when she started to look and learn about the biodiversity around her.
Gardens are different things to different people. But there's one thing common to everyone's gardening experience, and that is, regardless of whether you're a beginner or you've had your hands in the soil for years, there's always something to learn. And this can open our eyes to a world we may never have really noticed before. That's what Mel Lugozo experienced when setting up her garden in Lake Coogee, a coastal suburb south of Perth.
Where are you going to put it?
Mel, before we delve into what your garden has become, what did you have in mind when you first started?
Well, when we first moved in, this whole backyard was paved, with the exception of these amazing fruit trees. We're lucky enough to have a huge mango tree. We've got 2 pear trees, a peach tree, an orange tree, and we've popped in an apple tree and a fig tree. It made sense to continue my food forest stream and pop a veggie patch in front of these fruit trees. I think I maybe had it there for about 18 months. So I did 2 winters and a summer, and I noticed very fast that the winter sun was lacking. There was almost none. With that and the combination of the north-facing hot wall, a veggie patch didn't go to plan in that area. It's now a child's playground, and we've moved our veggie patch to a more suitable location.
Wow, can you see it?
So you've chased the sun out the front, and clearly it's been a success.
Well, yeah, absolutely has. And I'm having a lot more success with this area. At the moment, I've got silver beet, broccoli, lettuce, broad beans, carrots, a lot of staple food, really, and a lot of pollinator-friendly plants. I don't spray anything in my garden, so having a lot of flowering plants, even herbs, and letting my brassicas as such like go to flower has really brought in a lot of predators. So stuff like aphids. I don't really have such a huge outbreak of those because I have the flowers the wasps need to feed on and then the aphids that they nest in. So the flowers have made a huge difference in the way that I garden. Once I started to look around, I realised that I had a lot of like predatory wasps and parasitic wasps. I also have a lot of ladybirds, lacewings, and it kind of started this little fascination where I take photos of them and start to learn about the insects that were in my garden, and I became obsessed with finding out what they were and taking photos and footage of them in action.
I can see your love of flowers spills out onto the verge.
I wanted to create a haven out the front to attract more native insects into my garden, and also native birds as well, so they act as my pest control in my veggie patch.
It's hard to beat the beauty of a display of everlastings.
Absolutely, they provide so much colour right here on my verge. If you leave them long enough, they will self-sow, which is fantastic because then they create a different little pattern or colour scheme in different spots. Or you can collect the seed and sow them again next year. I really wanted to create an ecosystem full of biodiversity that benefits both my community and also my garden as well. I really wanted to make sure that there was something in flower all year round, so at least a few different types of plants in flower for different insects or birds. And I also had to make sure that the plants could survive in my local soil. So I don't water out here at all. So plant selection was key for me. I've chosen mallee eucalypts, camelorsium, kangaroo paws, grevilleas, aramia. The key really is diversity.
So this is council land out here. Your local council supportive of verge gardens?
Yeah, I guess we're really lucky here in Perth. My council's actually really proactive, and I've created this all in line with their guidelines. So I'm getting a lot of different wildlife in here in such a short period of time. I've got resin bees, so they will nest in logs where I've either drilled holes or sourced logs that have like the natural beetle boring holes. Leaf cutter bees, they tend to pinch the leaves from my pear trees to actually create their little nesting walls, and some of them nest in the hotels as well, and some nest in the ground. Blue-banded bees buzz through my tomatoes and eggplants in my veggie patch. I'm also really lucky that I've seen them nesting in my garden. I also get cuckoo bees, which nest inside the blue-banded bee nests, so they're really cool, and they're really pretty as well. I also get mast bees, and they nest in the hotels or the logs. And there's also a lot of different ground nesting bees that I get in my yard. Sometimes I see them between the pavers or out here on the verge or even in my backyard. I've got everlastings down the side of my house, and I've created another little habitat garden as well with ponds, with hopefully some frogs that'll visit soon. I've got dragonfly nymphs that moved in almost right away, western pygmy perch that control the mozzies, so that's been fantastic. I've also reused all the pavers that I lifted from my backyard into these gabion walls to create more habitat around my patio for lizards, hopefully frogs, spiders, bees. I've created this ecosystem with less pests and more beneficial insects, and I get better crops in return. Over time, I've realised it's all connected. I can actually see it happening in my veggie patch and out here on my verge. Most of all, I find it really fascinating to see.
It won't be long before we're swimming in all that delicious summer fruit. Have a look at these passion fruit. And I've heard it through the grapevine that Hannah's got a technique that could set you up for a bumper crop.
Gardening is such an exciting challenge. There are so many techniques to master to improve output and efficiency. While I do heaps of propagation here to grow plants from scratch, I'm going to show you a grafting technique that will help you get more produce quicker. Grafting is basically joining two plants together. It's about making the most of hardy and strong root systems that are more suited to your local area by attaching one fruiting variety on top of a suitable rootstock plant. It's a standard technique used for many fruiting and ornamental trees, plus some annual crops like tomatoes and eggplants. While I've grafted lots of plums and fruit trees in the past, I'm keen to graft a special grape variety. These existing vines aren't overly productive. It produces green grapes, which are delicious to eat, but unfortunately it's prone to downy mildew and has really suffered over our past 3 mild summers.
But the old vine's still got a good root system, and I don't want that to go to waste.
So I've got my hands on a more resilient variety called Isabella. I picked it up from a local gardener, and I'm going to graft this scion wood onto our existing vines, and they're going to produce beautiful red fruit. There are different layers within the stem, and they each have different functions. On the outside is the protective bark layer, and on the very inside is the wood. But between them is the all-important green cambium layer of the stem. This is where all the active growth occurs. There's also the xylem and phloem layers, which are the food and water transport systems, and they'll join up too. And new cells are produced over time to join the wood together. This way, the new scion branch becomes part of the original plant. There's lots of different types of grafts you can do, even if the roots and the shoots are different sizes. Today, I'm going to be doing the chip graft, but no matter what method you do, the best time to do it is in early spring. Before you start, it's really important to sterilise your tools. I'm using a blend of metho and water. I cut back the vine around 1 week ago, and I've taken off more than 90% of the plant. I could have left more, but if I graft higher in the plant, it means I have to manage 2 different varieties, which is a bit trickier. Instead, I've taken it way back to a stump, which means I just manage 1 superior variety. But before you get grafting, there's something you should know. You have to come and do a pre-cut a few days before you actually graft with your pruning saw or your grafting knife below the point you're going to graft at. This releases the sap's pressure and it'll flow down the trunk. You'll see it. If you don't do this, the sap will actually come and push your graft out, destroying it. I start by scraping back the rough bark. Then I make a crescent moon shape at the base, creating a small shelf. I slice off a small section of bark above this. Now it's time to get some scion wood, and I cut off any excess stem. Then, using a sharp grafting knife, I slice off a bud and keep it moist until you're ready to use it. I then gently wedge the bud into the shelf, making sure I've lined up the cambium layers on one of the edges. Finally, I secure it by wrapping it up with some grafting tape. And then I repeat the whole process on the other side of the rootstock. This gives me a couple of options of how I want to train it, whether it's up over this archway or along the fence line. But more importantly, it guarantees success because I'm doubling my chances of the graft taking. This is looking pretty good. This warmer weather will help the grafts heal and grow beautifully. And hopefully, in a couple of seasons, I'll be feasting on these new grapes.
Still to come on Gardening Australia, Clarence hedges his bets. Tammy's shown how to make room to grow, and a collaboration between an artist and a garden designer that grows joy at work. I don't know about you, but at this time of the year, I get hungry just thinking about all of the crops I'm going to plant, harvest and eat over the months ahead. But what about people growing professionally? Well, Millie's dropping in on one of the best in the business to find out what goes into growing some of the most in-demand produce around.
The Dandenong Ranges east of Melbourne are known for their rich soil and high rainfall, making it perfect for growing anything, but especially food. Here in the aptly named suburb The Patch, I'm visiting a market garden brimming with delectable fruit and vegetables that are picked fresh on the day before they head to city restaurants. It's headed up by owner and ex-restaurant manager, Oliver Shorthouse. Hey, Oliver.
Hey. Come on in.
Wow.
Just picked this morning.
Fantastic.
And then it all comes into our packing shed for sorting, washing, and then eventual packing on for the restaurants.
What a bunch of treasure. Such gorgeous produce, and the colours here.
Particularly at winter when we've got all these beautiful radicchios and different brassicas. Having worked in restaurants for, I suppose, all my life up to 5 or 6 years ago, I wanted to be still part of restaurants, but not working in restaurants. And so this gives me a real opportunity to still be part of the industry and part of the scene, but not actually have to work on the floor every night. So we bought this property 10 years ago and really began farming kind of by accident. In our apartment in Carlton that we were living in, we had 300 little tomato plants, and we started transplanting them by hand as soon as we got here, and it was too hard, so we thought we'll go out and buy a tractor attachment. Once we had the tractor attachment to get them in the ground, it all went from there.
As the business expanded, so did the need for more growing space. Luckily, not far away, there was land for lease with 46 polytunnels. What are you focusing on growing?
We grow everything. So we grow 100, 150 different things over the years. And then we study menus and we look at the different seed catalogues and we try and find little things that are a little bit different that we know chefs will love.
Oh, wow. Wow! Such an abundant space. How big are these glasshouses?
Each one is 3,000 square metres.
Wow, that's a lot of space.
It is a lot of space. So what we're growing here is what's called a rosa, and it's a pink radicchio, and very unusual and very diverse, absolutely gorgeous.
It's not a big heart like some of the other varieties.
No, and it will develop one. This one's probably a few weeks younger than it needs to be. You can already see the colour that it's developing, and it's also a lot less bitter, supermarket radicchio to be as well.
Can I try?
Go for it.
It's still bitter, like it's got a solid bitterness, but you wouldn't pull back from it.
And it's very tender leaves as well, they're very soft, and the colour is just next level.
That is so beautiful.
Pure white through to pink and bits of sort of bronze and green as well.
And what are the keys for you, do you think, to growing it? I mean, timing's a big one, yeah?
Timing's the biggest one. So you want to get these in late summer at a time where you can grow them to a really great size before the days start to shorten and before the temperature starts to drop. Now then, once the temperature has dropped, they'll fatten out, they might rot a little bit, and that's when you get the sweeter radicchio, that's when you get the better colour, and that's when the radicchio really comes into its own.
What a beautiful centre. And so you're actually protecting that by tying the leaves together.
That's right. So it's what's called a broadleaf endive, and it grows beautifully as a cooking green. But what you can do, and what we do, is once it reaches a certain size, we bring all the leaves together. You wrap a rubber band around it, an elastic band, and then this is 3 weeks blanched. So in not very much time, you get this amazing white. The leaves turn more yellow, and flavour is less bitter.
And it's essentially just robbing those leaves of light, which means those cells stretch a bit, they become softer, more supple. It's a negative thing in some gardening situations, but here you can use it to your advantage.
Yeah, sometimes we rely on the genetics to bring us a product, and sometimes we influence that as well.
Oliver credits growing success to both the infrastructure and using organic practices.
We add compost, a little bit of lime, and that's about it. The tunnels provide an amazing temperature and environment for year-round growing. So most of the things that we're growing now, we grow year-round, and they grow differently and they grow at different speeds, but we can essentially grow most of our crops 52 weeks of the year. It allows us to have a full-time team and also provides consistency for customers too.
Ex-chef Rochelle Van Diggle has been working at the farm for the past couple of years.
I think it's so important for us just to be able to have that connection with our food, have a connection with the land, and have a connection of the way that food then interacts with our bodies. I think it's just a full cycle, and we're just missing that one piece of that puzzle.
So are you going back into the kitchen?
I'm always in the kitchen. If you want to grow food, you have to know how to cook. They go hand in hand.
It's true, there's not many gardeners I know who aren't great eaters as well.
Yeah, exactly. I love eating.
I'm excited to see this here because a few years ago I grew a beautiful crop of it and I just could not work out how to eat it.
Yeah, so this is in Italian puntarella, which means a little pointed one. And it's a chicory again, Catalonia chicory. And you can eat the leaves, of course. They're quite bitter, but great braised. But what we grow it for is these things, which are the puntarella, and it's something unique to this plant.
But this is like the flower spike, yeah, so it's a totally different part of these plants that you're eating.
That's right. So these will turn into flowers and beautiful blue flowers. But what we do is we get rid of all of that external growth and julienne them, very, very thinly sliced, in iced water. And what that does is it sucks up all the water, makes it super crispy and mild. They go all curly, and then you do an anchovy dressing. And it's very, very typically Roman of a certain time of the year.
And are they hollow in the middle? Do you want to snap one open? And as soon as these vegetables are out of the ground, it's not long before they wind up on dinner plates.
We harvest every single item to order, and within 12 or 18 hours, it can be in the kitchens in front of a chef.
Wow.
And that's a real critical part of what we do. And without those chefs who are capable to transform what we do in creative ways, we wouldn't exist.
What have you personally taken from this experience?
Food is so diverse. We only see such a small section of it in the supermarkets. And coming here, you see there's thousands of varieties we haven't touched yet. So I think getting more unusual food and making a more market for it, that's where we want to be heading.
Without great farmers, I don't think you're going to have great restaurants. And without great restaurants, you don't have great produce coming in as well. So we work together and create something, I think, which is really special and unique.
If you're after new foliage friends to invite into your garden, then look no further than the saltbush family. There's loads to choose from, and different species grow all over the country. One of my favourites is Old Man Saltbush, Atriplex nummularia. Now, it's a great plant for many tricky situations. They'll take the wind, they'll cop salt-laden soils and belting heat. Now, they grow great on rooftop gardens, and they can survive a 40+ degree day. Now, it grows into a beautiful billowy shrub between 1 to 2 metres tall, and the silver grey leaves, well, they add a steel-coloured splash to a green garden. The leaves can also be plucked and flash fried in hot oil, where they become salty and crispy like a little salty chip. Yum, they are great. Rhagodia spinescens is an equally adaptable species. Now, it has a lovely spreading form, and it can grow up to about 1.5 metres high, as well as 4 metres wide. Now, it's great as a low hedge and for smothering the ground so the weeds can't get a foothold. And if you're after something a bit different again, take a look at Anadia nutans, climbing saltbush. Now, this little one likes a sunny, warm position, and it will climb or crawl, so you could plant it en masse as a ground cover. Perhaps best of all, by planting saltbushes, you'll also be bringing in biodiversity. Now, some produce a small edible berry, but I leave those for the birds and the lizards who love them. Some are host species for butterflies. The saltbush blue butterfly, also known as checkered blue, and its caterpillar larvae feed mainly on saltbushes. The saltbush family is full of rugged, interesting, low-fuss plants. So whether you're growing on a balcony, a rooftop, or a backyard, go on. Invite a few of the saltbush family to your garden party this weekend.
Indoor plants can be addictive, and when you have success, some of the collection will outgrow you. They'll definitely outgrow me. Tammy is heading back to Foliage Central to learn how trimming them down to size can help multiply the rewards.
Rainforest climbers have overtaken the indoor plant world and are growing in living rooms all over the country. In Latin, philodendron means tree hugger, and many plants in these families grow vertically up trees to find light. A key to Gowan's success is that she's giving her plants something solid to cling to and climb. And considering some plants would naturally clamber up 10 metres tall, she has tips to keep them contained to a more manageable height. Gowan, what plant is this and why do people love it?
It's a Philodendron glorious, which is a primary hybrid between Melanochrysum and Gloriosum.
Hence these like beautiful heart-shaped leaves.
That's correct. Velvet.
Velvet. Beautiful. And it's getting a little bit tall, so what's the plan?
Well, I think it's time to give it a chop.
Sounds brutal.
Absolutely. We're going to untangle the roots. You can see they're quite attached.
Now, you often see these poles wrapped in coconut coir.
Yes.
But the roots don't often attach. How did you get yours to attach so fiercely?
I actually water the pole to keep it moist, so the roots are searching for the moisture. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut there to get a bit of length, and then these two roots at the top here are firmly embedded into the pole, so I'm going to cut those as that's less traumatic for the plant. And now we're going to go down and cut approximately halfway between those two.
And with this stump here, will it just grow out from the node?
It will grow from that little node there, as it has done down here in the past, where I've chopped it in the past. And from the node below that, it has started to put out this offset that you can see here. So the plant will be pushed into action to make a new offset.
And now with this one, do we have to do anything special with the cut end?
Dab it with cinnamon. Cinnamon's very good as an antibacterial agent in plants.
Then we can pot it all up.
You can pot it up.
Great. Add some heavy rocks to the bottom of your pot. The poles can become top-heavy and this helps with stability. Then, centre your new pole. Nestle the cutting against the pole and position it so it has maximum contact. Place it deep enough so that the bottom node would just touch the potting mix. Using plant ties, firmly secure the stem to the pole so it can't move. Add your potting mix. For mature aroids, Gowan uses equal parts coconut coir chunks, super coarse perlite and orchid bark. She also adds some charcoal and coconut peat. Gently compact it so the plant and pole are nice and stable. To give the cutting a good start, top dress with some slow-release fertiliser.
We've completed it.
That's enough?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh, isn't she beautiful?
She's gorgeous. I'm going to give her some water. Now I'm watering up the new
yes,
coir
a secret.
pole, making sure we've got even watering, and again up the pole again, and there we're done.
And now we went from one plant to two. You can use this chop and extend method on other vertical growing philodendrons, monstera, pothos or epipremnum. It's a great way to clone your favourite plant and keep it below the roofline.
I love seeing the creative ways people use plants to bring a bit of nature back into city gardens. Our next story is with an artist and a garden designer whose collaboration is unexpected, detailed and beautifully creative. I know you're gonna love it.
My name's Becky Orphan. I'm an artist. What inspires my work is nature within an urban environment. We're in Brunswick in the inner north of Melbourne. I live and work here. It's kind of grit and it's sort of light industrial. It also has a really great art community, lots of galleries, lots of artist studios, lots of like-minded people in the area. I've always been a city girl and I love living in the city, but I also love nature in the city. So one of the things I do love about Brunswick is there's quite a lot of parks and you can still seek out those bits of sort of nature like possums. There's some tawny frogmouths in the park near my house. Things like that really inspire me. I guess it's that element of things being able to survive in the city and adapt instead of being driven out. This is my studio garden, also known as the secret garden, and I love that it's right outside of where I work. Having the garden definitely helps the art. Even if I'm not working on something that's specifically plant or nature-based, it still can provide a really good mental break if you're stuck or if you just need to sort of change your environment up a little bit. Sometimes my work is quite abstract, so it is just literally looking at shapes. So being able to go out to the garden and get sort of shape inspiration is really good too. I was lucky enough to be surrounded by lots of gardens as a child and definitely used to visit the Melbourne Botanic Gardens and the Fitzroy Gardens quite a lot. When I first moved here, the graffiti was already on the walls and lots of people asked me if I was going to paint a mural because that's part of my work, and I said absolutely not. I love the graffiti. I love that it was already here. It makes it feel like almost like a ruin, I guess. And the graffiti is such a nice contrast, all the plants and the colours, and they actually work so beautifully together. Colour is a really big part of my work, so flowers and the varying degrees of green within nature, the textures, the shapes, forms in nature, always really, really inspiring. And often I look out to the garden or to flowers to look for new sort of shapes and forms. This garden is around 12 metres by 12 metres. I rented this space around 2 years ago. It was just all weeds. I knew what kind of gardens I liked, which was sort of that wild style, prairie, meadow-esque type garden. One of the people I discovered when I was looking at gardens was Piet Oudorff, who's a Dutch gardener. He designed the Highline Garden in New York. The Highline is a garden which has been created on an old train line that's become public space. So that idea of a wild garden against a sort of urban backdrop was really inspiring to me. A friend said to me, "Oh, you should speak to my partner, Jimmy, who loves these style of gardens and is a gardener." And then once I met Jimmy, we worked together and he just created this absolute dream out here.
I'm Jimmy Singh. I was a DJ, used to run nightclubs. Now I design gardens. Meeting Becky and talking to her about what she would like to see in a studio garden was so exciting because you can see in her work she loves flowers, loves colour, and we talked about how to do this in a really exaggerated way. The planting is an unreal version of a meadow, a grassland, a prairie type of setting. This means that we have pops of colour and different foliage forms popping up through the grasses at all stages of the year. This is one of the indigenous grasses that's planted, Dicalacne crinata. It's native to our local grasslands here. Love these plumes.
Yeah, these are my favourite bits. They look like antennae or little tails.
For Becky, I had a real look out for plants that are like characters themselves. You know, this idea that if you put two googly eyes on it, what would they express? And for that, I'd like to think of giving Becky all these characters to keep her company at her studio.
This is a really great surprise that just popped up over the last week. I've never seen it flower before.
Yeah, this one's Angelica gigas. It's a biennial, so it only flowers every 2 years. It comes out of these big muscular type of strange pods and opens up into this globe form.
I like this bit because it looks like a fairy swimming pool. Definitely imagine some fairies having a good time in there.
Yeah, who's in there? I've planted very densely. In 100 square metres, we have 700 plants put in here.
I really love these ones. Obviously, I love the yellow petals, but when they fall off, I love the height of this centre bit and the texture. And they stay for quite a long time, and it looks really beautiful the way they move in the wind.
Yeah, they'll be our main vertical all through winter. They'll be standing. They're a prairie plant. They're your namesake.
Yes.
Rudbeckia maxima. Beautiful big foliage down the bottom. It's pretty rare for a grassland plant to have such big leaves. This is the blue devil, one of my favourites. It's another grassland species from around our area, but I love it when it's given some space out, just ranges out, finds its way across other plants, makes like a constellation almost of stars.
I'm really taken by the colour, this sort of blue colour. It looks otherworldly. Like, I can't believe it exists. It looks like it's out of a Pantone book. When you think of Indigenous plants, you don't think of them being bright blue.
True.
I feel like working with Jimmy was a dream. He was so great at taking my very rough idea and turning it into this incredible garden that we have here. I think we worked really well together, just personality-wise. We became friends in the process, which was really great.
We shared a love for similar aesthetics and plants, which made us smile. It's been beautiful just continuing to discover them with Becky as they come up in the garden.
The garden makes me feel completely joyous. I literally pinch myself every day that I get to look out at this incredible space that we created together. It's a really beautiful space. It's really calming. I also wanted it to be a space where my friends and creative community could benefit from and gather, and it's definitely become that as well.
Cheers. Cheers. Good tune.
Time to dust off the cobwebs and get the blood pumping. Here's your list of jobs for the weekend. In cool temperate areas, warming weather sees aphids active, so keep an eye out, especially on the underside of brassica leaves. Squash them if you see them to deter their mates. Spring salads and sangers are not the same without lettuce, so for a twist on these lovely leaves, direct sow the seeds of heirloom varieties like Freckles, Merlot and Red Velvet now. Another sandwich staple is beetroot, and it's time to harvest those sown in winter. The most obliging of root veggies, you can see their crown above the soil surface. The smaller the crown, the more tender the beet. In warm temperate gardens, the smell of sweet peas is in the air. Cut some blooms for a vase. You'll encourage further flowers and get to enjoy the intoxicating scent indoors. The grass is growing, so it's the perfect time to dethatch your lawn. Using a thatching rake, remove any dead stems and other debris that's collected between the grass and the soil. With passion fruits harvested, it's time to give overgrown vines a haircut. Remove deadwood and prune back to 1 metre diameter from the trunk. Your vine will be happier, healthier and more productive for it. In the subtropics, broad beans are starting to flower, but they won't set fruit until the weather warms up a little more. Keep the water up to them, give them a feed and wait. Whether you dig sweets or savouries, cordial or cocktails, you can't go past a homegrown lime or two. Plant a Tahitian lime for tart, juicy fruits and a mackerel for its foliage and zest. Cyclamens are coming to the close of their Fab Floral show, so it's time to give them a rest. Allow the tubers to dry out and place them on their sides under the shade of a tree until next year. Tropical gardeners, the sun has a bite to it, and if you're feeling it, so is your garden. Knock together some shade cloth covers and teepees to protect vulnerable and sensitive plants. Easy to grow and generous once they fruit, sow pumpkin seeds now. Make sure they have room to roam, and don't be afraid to experiment with different varieties like Turk's Turban. Two-spotted mite are emerging after winter, mottling leaves, distorting buds and leaving webbing on plants. Treat these sapsuckers by wiping both sides of affected foliage with a damp cloth daily for a week. Gardeners in arid zones, if you're looking for a basil that won't get busted by grasshoppers or hit by the heat, try a Thai basil. Tough and tasty with its aromatic anise flavour. Caterpillars are getting busy and many can make short work of young plants. Remove them by hand, but remember, not all caterpillars are garden pests, so check before you collect. If you notice small white marks on the bark of your citrus trees, it's likely white louse scale. Treat with a horticultural oil before it affects the health and vigour of your plant. Have a fantastic weekend in the great outdoors, gardeners, and don't forget to subscribe to our e-newsletter for regular updates, tips, tricks and more great gardening info. Well, that's all we can fit into the cart for this week. But we're already sowing the seeds for next time. Here's what's coming up.
I meet a seed scientist who specialises in collecting rare and threatened species from our native rainforests.
I'm making a simple pond that we could all have a go at in a small space. Yeah, just let them go anywhere. That's it. And we meet a horticulturist looking to pump up the colour.